We are live, both recording and on Facebook now.
Great. I don't see Rachel yet.
She's not in yet. There she is.
There she is. Yep. Okay.
Yep. And I think Miss Muller was in another meeting and she's getting off in just a couple of minutes and coming out. So she should be joining also.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, how is everybody?
Great. How are you? That's pretty fancy face mask you got on today.
Yeah, my daughter informed me I needed to up my game.
Yeah, that's that nice
Yeah.
your daughter feedback. Yeah, I get it.
Okay. Elizabeth, as far as sound goes, so can you...
I hope you're asking me about your sound because yeah, it is a problem.
Yep. Okay. Is that better?
That's a lot better. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we were trying to get it to work, but it wasn't working. And the other thing I need, well, I think I'm good. Okay, we should have, is Deb on?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
There she is.
I'm just making sure our team has logged on.
Who's Lakita Howard?
That's their team. Okay, am I muted?
Nope.
Okay, I think that our team, it looks like, is here. Oh, I see Mr. West has logged on as well. So I think we're all here. Mr. Penley will not be joining us today. So we have everybody but him.
Okay, and our team is here as well. So I'll just, if it's all right, Joy, do you have all of the names? Or would you like Rachel to read the names and then I can read our names for Amber if she needs me to?
We can do that officially. That'd be fine.
Okay.
So I have Dr. Raimundo, Dr. Narig, Amber Ryan, Angela Polite, John Cash, and Mark West, and myself.
Okay. Thank you.
And Deb Muller. I don't know if I said Deb.
Yeah, Muller. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I have myself, Tracy Butler, Josh LeClaire, Joy Crome, Amy Hawkins, Barbara Hoffman, Beth Friedel, Bill Morrison, Lakita Howard, Matt Lawrence, Paulette McKibben-Shedd, Valerie Jessup. Okay. All right, so the time is 12:34, and so I think we should start. So thank you for sending the leave language back. I think that since we only have 2 hours today, I'd like to spend some time going through that, if you will. And then I also sent you back the early release document with just one minor strike through. So I'm thinking for the 2 hours time that we have, maybe we should just focus on those two things.
I'm fine with that. Elizabeth, I just got the leave form a little bit ago, so I would just need a few minutes to caucus if that's the case.
You mean the early release one?
Yes, that's the one I mean. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The early release one.
Sure.
So I would just need a few minutes to caucus and review with the team. I did see the change was very, very minor, but I just want to make sure.
Sure. Okay. So how about, well, do you want to do that first and just get that out of the way?
That's fine with me.
Okay. So do you want, how much time would you like?
Give me maybe 10 minutes.
Okay.
Just to gather everybody and we'll review it real quickly. We may not need the full 10 minutes. And if I do, I'll text you to get back on.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. 12:35. It's 12:45. So we'll see you at 12:45.
Right. Okay. So do we want to go to our breakout room or do we just want to stay here?
I have to assign them real quick. Okay, so they're available when you need it.
So do we want to go or do we just want to wait?
I'd say wait. I don't think we have anything to talk about.
Yeah, I don't either. Okay, I'm just going to turn my camera off for a minute. It looks like they might be wanting to come back in. It's like Rachel's in the waiting room.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had left the room. I apologize, Rachel.
You're muted though, Rachel.
Hey, it's okay.
I'm gonna mute you
We
guys.
got done a little bit early, so I thought that we try to keep moving forward. All right, so we did review what you sent back, and I'm just gonna try to split my screen here. As far as the strike through with the parties agree that there will be no ERPLs, and then just changing that to the school year, that's fine. We don't have any issues with that at all. And we actually don't have any issues with the other strike through. We're just wondering, the reason that was put in there was in case of any conflicts, to be real clear about which document trumps the other document. So we were just curious if what the issue was with that.
I'm sorry. So it was just that it said that in the event of a conflict that the MOU would prevail, but there's a little bit more to section Q than just this. So that's why I didn't want to have that there. I was thinking too, if anything were to change, that you and I would, or we could reconvene and have the conversation to find a solution.
Okay.
But, you know, there are certain, when you look at Q, there are.
It is a lengthy paragraph. We did look at it real quickly.
Right. So there are five subsections to Q. So that's the only reason why I did that.
Okay, so that's fine. We can agree on that.
So could we TA on this today?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and so that is beautiful. And so that is good progress for day one of this week. So thank you.
Sure.
I want to just go back to something that we talked about last week, though. Unless you need this as a standalone for the purposes of getting the school calendar out to parents and teachers and faculty staff, we could do this as a standalone, but the rest of what we want to discuss, I was hoping to put in just one document.
We can agree to that. We do need this one for purposes of calendaring. So if we could sign off on this one, and then we would agree to move forward with all of the others as one. That's fine.
Okay, absolutely. We can wrap this one up today.
Yay.
Good work. Exactly. So then will you guys clean it up on your end and then send it over? And
Yes.
And
Amber's
so-
nodding her head. We will.
okay, and then I'll sign it and scan it back.
Okay.
And then can you sign one and scan one back to me, so I'll have one with mine and one with yours? Okay,
Absolutely.
perfect. That is good work.
So Rachel, we were thinking that we would like the counter that you sent us on the leaves. We'd like you to go through it and give us your rationale and for the changes.
Okay. So let me just pull that up and I'll go through. Give me just a second.
Elizabeth, can you share your screen on that?
Sure.
What do you think?
Sure.
Just tell me when you're ready and I'll start talking.
I will pull that document up and share my screen. Okay. Got it?
Okay. I'm ready.
Make it a little bit bigger if you can, Elizabeth.
Sure. How's that? Good?
I can
Excellent.
see it.
Okay. All right.
All right. So the first part is just typical MOU language. So when you go down to the first strike through, the primary concern, and we can talk about this as far as the way this was worded, was who deems the environment to be unsafe, first of all. And I guess we had some concern about I don't want to say ambiguity because that's not really what I'm thinking, but the conditions of right now in today's environment, there could be a case for any, we have so many different variables that play into it. We weren't sure what would qualify as an unsafe environment. There isn't really an objection as far as reasonable judgment. That would be the expectation at any given time, to protect yourself. That is always our expectation. Our problem with the sentence, the employer shall not require any employee to work under conditions the employee deems a danger to their health or safety. I would just ask for what would that look like? What does that qualify as? So then the next part is really about following federal guidelines. And should we need to enact FFCRA, the action steps within the flow chart, we don't have a problem with the flow chart. In fact, that's the one that we're using anyway. However, we'll follow the federal guidelines. For FMLA, that's also, we already offer that, and we will continue to offer that within accordance with the state and federal guidelines. And then I'm moving.
Rachel, can I go back to the federal guidelines up there first?
Well, so are we gonna do them in pieces, or are we gonna do the whole thing? Because if that's the case, I want to go back to the first part.
I think there should be discussion back and forth as we try to come up with why we're going where we're going. That's how I'm used to, but that's up to y'all. I'm here to support y'all. So,
your call, Elizabeth.
Yeah. So, well, I think for me, I'd probably can we do it in chunks?
Sure.
Okay. So
I'm going to let that be the first chunk, and we're ready to listen.
Okay, that's good. Okay. So, and thank you, Tracy, for stopping us, because first of all, it's hard to wait. Number one, and then it would be a lot. You're right. So good call there. So going back to that first section right under the COVID-19 leave provisions, where both of those sentences were struck. So a couple things here. First of all, the whole purpose of putting that there was to make sure that the teachers and support staff were able to use their professional judgment to determine. And like you said, there's always, it's a constantly changing dynamic from day to day. Things are constantly changing all the time. There are many variables. So that was put in there to allow or to provide a mechanism for teachers and support professionals to use their professional judgment in situations not only for themselves, but also for the students. Because we know that one of the things that we do all day long, all the time, is make sure that students are safe. We have to make sure ethically that we take care of them. They are our first priority. So that was part of that reason that was in there too. So there's that. And then the second thing that you said was not sure what would qualify as unsafe. Well, we have our CDC guidelines, we have our 3 C's, we've been talking a lot about expectations for the environment and the expectations for ABM. So I think those are some of the things that we could consider. So I just hope that we're able to make sure that we can provide some standard expectations for the environment. And if something is askew or different, that would absolutely be a trigger to deem an environment unsafe.
Okay, so can I, and we're going back and forth, right? I don't want to interrupt you, but I have a thought, and I know how you, like you said, it's hard to wait. I know that, so then I would consider that under a different part of the MOU as far as what we are committed to supplying as far as supplies and keeping the environment safe, rather than with leave.
Well, the reason that it's in here with leave is because if I was trying not to say anymore. So if they're just setting up to support, if in fact something is repetitive, if something is ongoing and the employee decides, I can't take this anymore, this environment is not safe, I might need to explore a leave option. That's why it was there. We absolutely could unstrike those sentences, if that's really a word, remove the strike through and put it in a different part of the document if you're amiable to the language itself.
And I also want to add too that we are feeling your pain with this because this is not traditional bargaining. This is more about the MOU. So we're feeling your pain with how things would flow. And keep in mind, we can wordsmith it, at the end and put things in certain areas unless it changes their intent or their what they apply to. But we even thought about, should there just be some general provisions that we put everything underneath that would include something like this. So we're with you in thinking that it's seems a little spotty here and there, but there is some method to our madness.
Right. Thank you for acknowledging that, because that's been difficult as we've moved through this to try to determine, because they are connected. So when Elizabeth said that way, I do see the connection. However, what I am going to say is I would not be comfortable without language that gives some kind of consistent, clear indicator, rather than the employee determining it's unsafe. Because what I see with that is a major opportunity to be inconsistent and we don't want to start pitting teachers against each other or start pitting a supervisor against a teacher. What we need to provide them with is some more consistent guidelines. So I'm not opposed to language as far as the environment goes, but I would want to make sure that it was much more clear than that, if that helps.
So let me ask you this question. Are you saying that if we create a subsection, because leave would be a subsection within the document, for health and safety or environmental expectations, and I'm just winging it right now with these titles here. Of course, we could do better with a little bit of thought. We could reinsert this language and then build some further language around that. Because I know that you trust I know you guys trust the professionals out there doing the job. And so I just want to give them an opportunity to say, hey, something's wrong in here. This isn't meeting the expectations. We need to address this. Just giving them a mechanism to do that.
Okay. Yes. So if that is then yes, I would definitely say, let's put in a procedure for the employees to be able to bring to our attention, shall we say, conditions that are not met or not safe, and an accountability measure for making sure that those conditions are met and that it's rectified. How does that sound?
So the accountability measure would be obviously on the district to be accountable.
Right.
Okay. All right. And we would need to have some kind of timeline for that accountability. Okay. All right. I think we could do something there.
Okay. Do you want me to keep going or?
Well, yes, because then Tracy had some questions here in this section.
Okay.
Yes. So about the federal guidelines, I wanted us to, my intent for this FFCRA action steps flowchart is I wanted us to have something in place because we know the federal guidelines, even the state sometimes are contradictory right now. We've got, some things happening a certain way and then it'll change on a dime. So what I was trying to get at is that if for some reason the flow chart goes away or the flow chart's updated or something new comes down, we get back together to see how that impacts, because I don't think it's only just going to impact, leave, but whatever new thing they could put out could impact other things. So I'm just wanted to make sure that we reconvene quickly to resolve any problems if those are rescinded by the government or if they're conflicting with the state. We want we want to keep it to local government. We want it to local decision making.
Okay, I do see what you're saying there. So what if we worded it some way that was specific, just because what I was looking at is specifically to this chart. So if this chart is updated, we will follow that chart. I didn't see a need to reconvene every time they change this particular chart, is where I was going. I wasn't even thinking as broadly as what you just presented. I was thinking more of they could make small tweaks or changes to this chart and to reconvene every time, like you said, as this is changing daily. But as it relates to just this chart, we will continue to follow this chart. But now that you're saying that, I do see a need, again, not maybe in this section, but in another section, to talk about if there are substantive changes to guidelines, either at the federal or state level, then we could reconvene, but not until those changes are ones that greatly impact the work environment.
Well, and that could be the same thing with this. For example, we don't have to reconvene the whole teams. If Elizabeth reaches out to you and say, hey, they updated the flow chart, or vice versa, the two of you could talk. Does it affect anything? And if it affects anything, then we could say, okay, how bad is it? And do we need to get back together? Or if it doesn't, the two of you could agree, okay, it doesn't affect anything. It's.
Well, I would hope Elizabeth and I would do that anyway. And just the way that was worded was almost we would have to reconvene bargaining.
It would be negotiate any changes. So if the chart was significantly changed, which changed the way we do things, which goes along with that FFCRA process down at the bottom that was stricken out, we want to be able to say, hey, how does that impact us? For example, say they took away the 10-day, the 2 weeks. We're definitely going to have to talk about that, and find out what our people are going to do. Because one of our biggest problems in this whole situation is that a teacher is not even given enough days a year under the current leave, which is by no means a fault of either one of these parties, but we're not given enough days to help us in the event we have even 2 of these incidences in our classroom. And I can almost, put some big wagers out there that we're going to have more than 2 incidences throughout this year of teachers having to go. And so they would expend everything. And we're trying to say, it is our position that we do not believe our people should have to dip into their own leave over this COVID mess. So that goes along with our overarching theme that we think that, sadly, because the district's put in the place they're in, they need to be picking it up, and in hopes that they can either recoup it via CARES, recoup it via whatever, later. But this is where we stand.
And I can appreciate all of that. And I know we're going to talk about leave much more, but what I want to go back to when we're specifically talking about the language as far as federal or state guidelines are, we can't agree to any language that's going to let us fall outside of those guidelines. So basically, like you used the example, what if the FFCRA leave goes away? Then we can't continue to approve it if it goes away. And we would have to have, I know we're going to have much more conversations about leave, but we can't agree to language that would put us in conflict with federal guidelines or state guidelines.
We're not asking that. The only time we would be in conflict is if they came back and said, you can't use the flow chart anymore. So in other words, if the flow chart went away and then we would need to come back and talk about will we still use a similar one and put our name on it? Will we still offer that time? How would it be paid? What can, how can we handle this moving forward? So we're not saying go against any guideline ever, and would never ask that. We're just saying that we're going to have something that's consistent and stays intact until we touch and go to the next thing that they come up with.
Okay. Okay. Are we ready for the next one?
Well, did we land on anything here, or we're
I
just,
would not be able to without having a caucus go through and look at this. And honestly, I think what we would be interested in is a counter to this counter.
okay. Well, this is your counter, so we've got a counter for you after we
Okay.
go through and talk about some of these things. So we'll pass something back.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So the next one was the FMLA. So just wondering why, again, I noticed the language is a bit is similar to what you had above. Just wondering why that was removed.
Well, we don't, and honestly, Tracy, Elizabeth, this goes right along with some of the discussion that we've had before. We want to continue to use FMLA as we've used it in accordance with federal, but those guidelines are written by the federal and state government. We don't create those guidelines. So to put those, again, we don't want to put anything in the contract that's going to put us in direct conflict. So if there are changes made to FMLA as a result of the pandemic, we would continue to offer it and continue to follow those guidelines.
So I think what we were asking for here was the consideration and the acknowledgement specifically that COVID-19 should be considered as part of that FMLA leave access, I guess. And so,
And it is. And as being part of this MOU, that is the acknowledgement that it is.
okay, so I think what we were asking for was just the articulation of that so that when our folks pick this up in 2-3 months and they start reading through it, FMLA is an option, because in our current CBA, it's not in there because nobody ever knew this was coming when we wrote it before.
So
But now-
that could be remedied as easily as adding to that sentence as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that.
Okay.
All right. And then down here, again, excuse me, I think we're having similar conversations as we move through this document. So again, this language is the same, and then all of this was removed. So,
Right. The language below is taken straight. I didn't see that you had added any changes other than exactly what we've been provided as far as guidelines. But what I don't want to do is limit us to just that. As they continue to update, we know our legislatures are meeting right now to propose addition, and maybe they'll add more time. I don't know. So what we want to do is stay current with what the FFCRA guidelines are. And even if they create another kind of leave, I know this was particularly written for CARES Act. So if it gets extended, that we will continue to offer that. So I'm not opposed to their adding the same kind of language as it relates to COVID, but it is, COVID's in the name. So I would hope that would.
So let me ask you something on this one then, because I hear what you're saying, and we did put it in there because just like the contract, we want our people to be able to pull this and say what is available to me. So would HR take on the responsibility of making sure that everyone has a copy of the FFCRA, and then every time it changes, they'll update that? It can be done electronically.
We've already done that.
Yeah.
We've already taken on that responsibility, and I am doing that.
Okay, so all of our people have read about this 1020, or at least received an email about.
I don't know if they've read it, but I know that all of the information has been made available to any employee now. We have sent out multiple emails to our principals, and every single time someone gets sick or has been diagnosed, I have been on the phone. We send to them this paperwork. If we are contacted, we send it to them within minutes. And talk through those options. And honestly, I can tell you this from experience, because I am making, when I tell you answering hundreds of emails a day and taking phone calls, it is that is true. And we have passed out, they sent along with the original paperwork a poster or flyer with a quick summary. But honestly, when you send those things out, it creates more questions than it does answers. And everybody's case is so unique. We are prepared to answer them as they come and to help talk people through it. We've also looked into and may be implementing, and I might be, I'm going to be throwing something out there that's late breaking, creating a special email address just for these kinds of questions where we'll be able to go in and answer those questions for people so they're not looking for who do I need to email.
Well, and I'm gonna say, yeah, we can't just send it to principals. We can't just have it on a website. And here's the reason why. We do not want to get in a position where a person has to determine whether or not they go to work sick because they have to feed their family. So if they don't know this is out there, and I bet you I could go right now and ask 10 people and they will tell me they don't even have an idea what the FFCRA stands for. So my point is I want to make sure that we have something readily available for them. If it's a big tab on the front of your on the front of your website, something where a person could go in and click and see what the options are underneath this act, so that they don't say, oh shoot, all I've got is either FML or personal leave, and I'm just going to take a bunch of Tylenol and go to work.
All right. Well, one other thing I'll tell you, and I know this because I worked on it all weekend, is the training that we are doing for all our teachers when they return for pre-planning, as well as other staff. If you know, you'll notice that part of pre-planning has a section for safety training, and this is included in our safety training. I do go over the FFCRA leave and the different leaves that are available in that training. It's very similar to what the board did, but there's also time embedded within this training where we show the website, we show the reopening plan, we show the different documents and go through each of those documents in this training and give teachers time to review not only that plan, but also their site-based plan. So that information is going to be shared, and I know it because I just recorded it.
So thank you for that information. Pre-planning starts next week.
Right.
And I'm not sure we're going to be finished with this process next week. I hope we are, but I don't know that we are. So my wondering, based on what you've just said, is are employees, teachers, support professionals going to be viewing something that we haven't bargained yet?
Well, I certainly hope not. And I know that on Thursday we committed to stay as late as possible. But we couldn't wait to put these things together. And if we need to go back and make changes to them, we'll go back and make changes. But at least to have the majority of the work done, I had to do it this weekend.
But do you understand why I'm saying what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And so will support staff also be included in those trainings?
Yes, they're coming back specifically for the purposes of receiving those training when we talk about like paraprofessionals and office specialists. Yes.
So the training is going to be face-to-face?
No, it's a Canvas course.
Okay.
And so is it self-paced or facilitated?
Self-paced.
So if they have questions, and I'm not trying to just belabor the point, but if they have questions, how do they get those questions answered?
The questions, the specific contacts for specific questions is embedded within the training. And there's also, like I said, going to be a link for if they need to submit questions.
So let me say this again so I can make sure I'm understanding it right. And I know school leadership teams met, I guess, last week. And so let me ask you this, are school leadership teams already working to develop site-based plans for reopening specific to their schools?
Yes.
So I would say that we had some conversation about that at the end of our meeting on Thursday. I believe that's when it was. and we had not reached an agreement, or we had had a conversation about setting some boundaries, I guess. At least that's what I remember. I just find it to be concerning that they're doing this work already, and we haven't even agreed on some very fundamental processes for this reopening.
So the reopening site-based plans that they're working on right now are the life safety kinds of things. They address the environment. They address the things like one-way signage, cafeteria procedures, lunch procedures. Those are not going to be things that we can wait on.
Lunch procedures? So are they deciding?
Cafeteria, where seating within the cafeteria.
But they're not making decisions about teachers and staff forfeiting their lunch period or anything?
Not at this time, no. At this time, they've been told to follow the contract because we haven't bargained that.
Correct. Well, that's good. Thank you. Okay. All right. So are we moving on from here? We
can
get what we needed from here, Tracy?
Yeah, so we're over, where did we leave off?
I think we're just talking about the fact that this was cut directly from the document, that human resources have been reaching out, but we were asking for something a little bit more than that. Making sure that everyone knows what their options are.
Yeah, we can counter with trying to articulate that it's going to be put into that training and anything else we feel comfortable with. So yeah, if you want to go ahead, Rachel, to the next one, I think it's when the above leave provisions are exhausted. You put human resources will meet with the employee to determine if they're eligible for any additional leave. What does that mean? Any additional leave, like just what they may have on the books?
That's exactly what that means. We can go through with each individual. If they've exhausted what they know, we can meet with each individual to determine where they stand and advise accordingly.
So this one, we were really standing tough on because we want the district to come up with some way of holding people harmless with their leave, because their leave is slim pickings, number one, and is sacred. So if they're going through regular leave for anything.
Can I ask a clarifying question? What is it sacred for?
Well,
because it's sick leave, correct? I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about like paid personal or annual leave. We're talking about sick leave, right?
Well, it all comes out of the same one. So if someone has to use their paid personal leave for some reason, it's still going to come out of their sick leave. It's still going to diminish the number. They only get a certain number all year long. I'm sure y'all know it off the top of your head. I don't. But my point is that this is of no consequence to them. They don't have a choice. They must come back. So if we go back to what I said earlier, we know that even just one incident in their classroom would wipe them out. So from leave. So if we have the FFCRA kicks in first, then after that, if they're wiped out on leave, all they would have is FML. I mean, so we're trying to say, we believe the district needs to come up with some sort of respite leave to solve these problems whenever we go into shutdown, quarantine, whatever the case may be per classroom.
Okay, that's going to create a funding and a budget issue for our district, which at this point, we're not prepared to.
Well, and our response to that is you need to push back where you need to push back, because we really, I mean, what are we asking people? What are you saying to people? Not only do we want you to come in and teach kids where you possibly can get sick and die, as well as children can get sick and die. We have no choice. I know I'm not blaming you for that. But the thing that we can do is we can say we have to put something in place to protect the people so that they can be out and feed their families if it should rise to that, and it's going to. And then you guys will have to work on that behind the scenes, either at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, whatever you have to do. We do it every day on our end. We fight every day for this kind of stuff on our end.
And then think about this too, Rachel. I mean, potentially it has the it has the potential to become even greater, because if our folks are forced with taking unpaid leave due to something that occurred in the work environment, and they have to do this over and over again, what is the longevity of someone returning to Volusia County schools? I think at some point this is then going to morph into a personnel problem, and we're going to be further behind the wheel than we already are.
We hear you on all points. However, we have to work within what we're given, and we'll go back. We'll look at any counter that you want to submit to us. But we hear you, and please know, like, we're under the same guidelines. Our principals are under the same guidelines. The same leave is afforded to all of our employees. So we will look at anything that you counter for us and come back with a different counter.
So we kind of could be here forever on this one, right? So that's what I just heard.
Well, we don't have to be, but
Well, and I heard
I mean,
too,
potentially, if you're asking me right now, will you commit to giving an undetermined amount of administrative leave to employees? I can't commit to that.
well, what I heard too was, and don't take this the wrong way, but this is how I interpreted what you said in a nicer way than I'm going to say it. So don't, just putting that out there.
Okay.
If we figure out the solution, you'll take a look at it. This is something where I think we need to work together to figure out what our options are out there for us. I mean, we immediately go to CARES Act because we know that money was sent down for the purpose of COVID. And so that's where my mind immediately goes. I know we had the conversation with Ms. Mueller last week about that it's already been spent. So I think that we have to work together to figure out whatever other options are out there that are available. And so again, this is COVID specific, because in any other time we wouldn't be asking for this.
Okay. Well, what I heard Ms. Mueller say last week was that we did not receive funding for the FFCRA leave. And I think you were referring to the CARES Act when you said that money has been spent, but we did not receive money for the FFCRA leave. And that is, the district is paying for that. So we are paying up to 80 hours per employee.
But remember those 12, what are they? Appropriate uses. That's not the title of it. I had it last week pulled up when I read it to you, but there were 12 uses that were allowable through the CARES Act. And one of those was to support something that we're suggesting here.
Okay.
So all I know is that what happens if I'm an employee at a school and there's something happens in my classroom and the district tells me, okay, Albert, you got to go home. You got to go home and quarantine. So now the district, my employer, is sending me home, but now it's on me to pay for it. I don't think that's how it works. In what scenario, when we go back and look at the protocols, what we're saying is if you have been directly exposed without using the personal protective equipment, which is supplied. Let me ask a question real quick on that while we're here. Are we getting N95 masks or are we getting something else?
I don't know what kind of mask we're getting. Does anybody
Not
else?
N95. No.
Not N95.
Don't we want to get those kind?
I don't know that they're in enough. I don't know the medical
I'm looking.
professionals
I would
are
need
enough
to get with Greg Aiken for clarification on that. I don't know. I don't have the specifics about what masks we're getting, but I can find out.
Okay, thank you. But I'm sorry, I kind of jumped into you midstream.
That's okay.
So I was saying that if my employer sends me home and tells me, Elizabeth, you have to go home now and you have to quarantine. My question is, well, why do I have to use my sick leave? Why do I have to pay for it? And I'm going to go back through the statute 1012.61. That's the sick leave one. I'm going to go back through there because I'm not confident that's how it works. Like, I believe that if I'm told by my employer to go home, then I need to be put on administrative leave.
Okay.
So there forces a problem that we're trying to avoid, and that is we don't want our teachers to have to feel like they got to wait until they're told that they've got to go on leave because they believe that because they come in and they test for a fever. So I gotta go ahead and get myself out of bed when I know I am sick, go in, get my fever, and then I'm going to get sent home.
No, that's not what we're saying at all. If you have a fever, you would be sent home because you have a fever and you're sick and you need to stay home. You don't need to come in the first place. But if not, you would be sent home because you are sick.
Right,
Okay,
but let me just suggest this.
What we're not saying is nobody will lose their job. But what we are saying is that we've got to have a reasonable process, and we put those 80 hours in place. In addition to the 80 hours, we allow the employees accrue sick leave. In addition to the sick leave, we have other leave options available.
But they're all unpaid is what I'm saying. So just like we had the conversation in another environment about parents who might choose to give their children Tylenol and cross their fingers and send them on the bus to school, what if I'm someone who's making, what if I'm someone who I have to have my paycheck? I mean, we are in very unique times and we all really need our paychecks. So that, I don't know where I'm going. But the point is, what if I take some Tylenol and I show up to work hoping that I get through my one thermometer scan and then I can make it through the day, but I really know that I'm sick, but I've got to get paid. If I know that when I go out, it's all on me to make ends meet, and I'm struggling already, what is going to encourage me to say, you know what, I'm not feeling good and I'm going to stay home so I don't spread this around versus just trying to tough it out and fly under the radar until I get too sick to work and then I've infected other people. So it's a proactive measure, I guess, in a way, to help make sure that the people that stay home or that need to stay home have the ability to do so.
We're going to have to work with those people on a case by case. We do not have, if you're asking me right now to commit to, we're going to give people much more sick leave per year, I can't commit to that.
We're not, okay. So in this moment, you can't.
Correct.
Well, maybe, okay. All right. Next one. So, not sure why this stuff was taken out.
This all has to do with privacy and HIPAA and FERPA laws, and those are the laws that we will follow.
Well, so we have, in putting this information here, we know that there are some things that are changing as far as an employer's ability to ask, how are you feeling? Do you have a temperature? Things like that. We certainly would not ask for anyone's medical records or anyone's, diagnoses. We know that those things are inappropriate to ask for, but we felt that this language was necessary in order to, again, keep our folks informed about what their, what they need to understand about this whole situation as far as it relates to medical privacy and confidentiality.
Okay, so how is that?
Well, and also, you've got FERPA here. We had a conversation about FERPA when it related to cameras and audio into the classroom, and FERPA was not apparently an allowable concern there, but now FERPA is a concern here. That was confusing to me as well. Could you maybe explain that?
Well, I think this is much more intentional, sensitive information than a classroom lesson. So for sure, when we're talking about letting someone know about someone's medical history, that is a much more intentional violation of that than if you're doing a classroom lesson, which VOL does all the time. So,
no, but the VOL is much different than what we were talking about with Volusia Live.
in Well, we can talk about that when we get to the Volusia Live conversation. I have a little different opinion of that. But if we're talking about sharing medically sensitive information with others, we will do what's necessary. We have the Department of Health form letter, and we have protocols in place for communication. But to specifically put in there, as you did, we would follow the laws of FERPA and HIPAA to address those, as well as our communication protocols. So if you wanted to add something about our communication protocols, we're fine with that.
Okay, because we've just referenced the statutes here in this first one, D, and then in E, we reference it again. And then in this last one, we just articulated that, if someone is sick and they contact their supervisor, they just let them know they're sick, but they don't give them the specifics. So if you are erring on the side of caution, I don't know why the statutes would be questioned. We also reference HIPAA here. I just don't know why we would take out something that helps people understand what their rights are as it relates to their medical and medical condition and confidentiality.
Okay.
Because when you put that statement there that says rules as they relate to FERPA and HIPAA, somebody's going to read that and they're going to say, oh, okay, but what does that mean in real time? Like, what does that really mean to me? And so the language that we suggested kind of gives them a little bit of it gives them an understanding of what's allowable and what isn't. So I don't know the harm in just sharing that there.
Well, when we caucus to look at the counter, if you want us to do it, I would need to do a side-by-side comparison and really look and see if there is some language we can put in there that would clarify those rules. That's fine, but I don't want to limit us either. And I know that those are lengthy rules, but we can look at it.
So the returning to work at the end, again, if I'm asked to get clearance or get the results of a COVID test in order to return to work, we're asking that those expenses be paid by the district.
We have two different types of clearances within our protocols. One is test-based and one is non-test-based. And I would be happy to share those with you, but we do not have a funding source to pay for COVID testing.
Do we not have a partnership with healthcare providers anymore?
Yes, we do. Are you talking about the Advent Health partnership?
Could be. I know we have a relationship, or we used to, with Halifax as well. Do we still have that relationship at all?
Yeah, as far as I know, we still have those same, because they help us cover, like, I'm looking at Dr. Neri. He has they help us cover some of our academy work, and there's specific things that they cover within those partnerships. I could get those contracts for you.
No, I don't want you to get those contracts for me, but what I'm just saying, for the purposes of COVID, and so in order to keep our schools up and running and fully staffed and confident that our folks are testing negative, would there be any interest on the district side to maybe explore some of those relationships and ask if there would be some kind of desire to?
We certainly would not limit it if there was a desire. We certainly would not limit it to using that and offering things to our employees. In fact, we're looking into that right now. However, what we would not want to do is obligate them. Additionally, the health department does offer free testing. So we do refer our employees to the health department.
So then, with that understanding, any way to maybe set up since we are the largest employer in the district, in the whole county. So what I'm thinking is, since we are the largest employer, we have these pre-existing relationships with these entities. Is there a desire on the district's part to set up some kind of process or in-house testing, either through the health department or Advent?
That also is going to reduce the number of need for leave. I mean, as soon as I can get that test back, I can come to work. If it takes me 3 days, that's 3 days of either unpaid leave, or the district's missing out on 3 days of the teacher in that classroom.
Agreed. And I'm going to just share with you a couple of thoughts around that. We do have Florida Healthcare, which will offer all of the healthcare plans that we have offer testing, as well as the health department, which offers testing for free. We are exploring other options along with those partnerships, like you just said, Elizabeth, but I don't have anything that at this point, that I can share as far as this is what we're going to do. I do know that our own board members have reached out and are making things available. We're not looking to limit or to say we're not going to offer anything. What we are going to say is to put it in an MOU and require it is not a realistic thing for us at this time.
So I need you to help me with something. So there's been a couple times that you've mentioned that you don't want to limit things or create a mechanism that somehow makes it harder, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand why you see some of this work that we're trying to do today as limitations.
Well, if this one in particular is a good example of that. This is saying that the district will cover all costs of being tested, of medical expenses of me being tested, without giving the parameters of which obligates the district. So if I'm going to go get a test from somewhere else, and I don't even know where I would go to get that test, and there are costs when we have so many options available within our own county, from the health department, from our own health insurance that we offer, and we are looking into those partnerships to require the district to then say, you must pay for that in order to return from work, would not be a feasible thing for our district to do.
So let me ask this question. So, because you said something that kind of made me think a minute.
We do want to offer our employees as much as possible, and we're looking into those things, but I can't put in an MOU document right now all of the different things that we're looking to do to support the employees.
Well, I think what we're asking for is a streamlined process that would make this not only faster so folks could return to work, right? Mm-hmm. But make it manageable for our employees. You just said, I'm not even sure where I would go. And you're exactly right. I can tell you that I had to get a test because I thought I had been exposed, and I really had to think, now where am I going to go? You see it every single night on the news, cars lining up here, there, but when it becomes you, it's like, dang, where do I go now? What do I do?
I can tell you that I was in the same position as far as, and when I mean outside, I don't know where I would go outside of those resources that we have available, like the health department, or I went through our school-based insurance.
So here's what I'm asking though. I'm asking for a way that we could, for our 8,000 employees, because again, we are the largest employer in the county. So we have a huge reach, right? And so as soon as we could turn these test results around, the better we are, because we're touching probably just about everybody in the county in some way, shape, or form. So a streamlined process where folks would know exactly where to go. There would be a quicker turnaround on the test, perhaps, and just make it efficient. But I'm wondering too, like going back to the partnership thing, I thought Advent came in and helped us out one time earlier this summer. Didn't Advent come to the district and help us out at one point?
Yes.
And we couldn't maybe replicate that again?
Not at the scale that you're talking about. It could not be replicated. And we're talking about the availability of tests alone. And I will tell you, I do know what you're talking about. I do know the specific incident. And that was no quicker than the test that I did through my healthcare provider.
But the point was they came and made it available, so no one had to go out seeking, right? I'm just wondering how, I mean, that just was.
Well, it's as far as getting the test results back, and there was no difference in time frame, is what I'm saying. And as we're moving forward as a nation, I don't know about the test results. The availability of tests alone, I know, is a concern. And at that, for the scale that we're talking about, as you said, we're the largest employer. I don't know how feasible that would be or the commitment that we could make sitting here today.
So unfortunately, what I think that I hear you saying is we're anticipating that we're going to have more cases and we're going to have more people getting sick, and we're going to need more testing and more access to test.
No, that's
As
not what I'm
well.
saying. I have no idea. I have no crystal ball. I do not know what's going to happen. And that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that if what you're asking, best case scenario with this language, we never test anybody because nobody's out. Worst case scenario with this language is every single employee gets tested. We can't commit to that level. And I certainly can't commit without even speaking to our partners, which as far as I can't commit to them in an MOU that we're signing. So what I am saying is I know for a fact, because I've been a part of a few of the conversations, that it is a top priority of our school board members. And I know that it's a top priority of our district to help as much as we can with getting our employees this kind of access. But we're only as good as the tests that are available and what our partners are willing to do. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
And that takes me back to where we were on the fact that people need to be paid while this is happening. So all that I keep hearing is that the district has put themselves in a position so that they take the least risk. The parents and all have choices on what risk they'll take, but the teachers, the paraprofessionals, and the office specialists have no choices. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I'm sorry that that's what you're hearing, Tracy, because that's not our position at all. Our position is that we do want, exactly as Elizabeth said, a streamlined approach to help us work within the framework of what we have available to help our employees. So I'm sorry that that's what you're hearing, but that's not our message at all.
so if that's the case, though, my question is, what extent are you interested in exploring those options to put something in place? So we're not obviously going to sign today. I mean, is there a willingness to make a phone call or two to see if something could even be created?
Yes, absolutely there is. After every one of these meetings, we reach out to all of our partners, to our school board members, to each other within the cabinet and beyond, and to our community to say, and we read the feedback and we look and we see what can we do and where can we meet in the middle on all of these things. So I think to hear that there's an unwillingness to move is not, but we are bound by a budget. We are bound by federal and state guidelines as far as what we can approve and not approve. So those are our parameters, our hard lines.
So I mentioned this last week. This is a business in a sense. I understand that, but we're in the business of people. And if we don't take care of our people, then our people can't run our business. And so all we are asking for are the considerations that will keep your people safe and healthy so that we can go about the business of educating children. And so we understand that there are community components to this. We've talked about that a bit, as far as the members of the community modifying their behavior so we can stop community spread. We can't do that by ourselves. Neither you nor I can do that by ourselves. But again, just you made a statement about being bound by your budget. Well, so are your educational professionals. If they don't get paid, they don't eat. And if they don't get paid, they don't get to stay in their homes and their apartments. So while they're going about the business of coming to work, because there is no one that I have ever met who had or ever spoken to in this period of time who is telling me, I don't want to go back to work. You know that too. Folks want to go back to work, but they want to do it where they believe that their health and safety matters, and that if in fact something occurs and they do get sick or they need to quarantine, that Volusia County Schools has got their back. I don't know that anything that's been stricken demonstrates that Volusia County Schools is there to catch them if something happens. And that's just what we're trying to achieve.
Okay.
So maybe at this point we caucus Are there,
Did
Tracy?
you say you had a counter to this to present to us, or are you not? Do you
I
want
want to caucus first
Okay.
and then bring something back. I'm
Okay.
probably making everybody dizzy because I'm rolling the thing on the screen.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a nervous habit. Sorry.
That sounds
Tracy,
fine.
anything else we need to ask before we caucus?
I can't think of anything.
All right, so this might take a bit of time. So it's 1:42. We're definitely going to need, how about 2:10? And if we come back earlier, I'll text you. Would that work?
Works for us.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Thank you very much. Good conversation, Rachel. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go into our breakout room.
Yeah, there's a couple of people I have to assign, but everybody else can go.
Okay.
Paulette, do you hear me? Paulette, do you know how to get to the breakout room?
I do, Tracy, but you have not assigned me to one. I don't have the dialogue yet.
It's so strange. It shows that you're assigned, but let me try again. Move to breakout room. So look down. Do you see the crumbs at the bottom that say more?
Yeah, but I don't have the dialogue still.
It doesn't say anything about a breakout room.
Not
And
yet,
then
no.
what about next to reactions? Is there anything that has like 4 panels that says breakout?
No, not yet.
I don't know what this is doing for you. This is very weird. All right, I'm going to move you to one room, and then I'm going to take you back out, and then I'm going to move you to this one, see if I can get you over there.
Okay.
Now hit that, and then I'm going to bring you back after you go there.
Okay.
Did it come up?
Mm-mm.
All right, let me flip over there and tell them what I'm trying to do. I'll be right back.
It's like I always have problems getting in this.
I know it. I don't
I
understand.
have a whole little dialogue. Hi there, I'm a boat. I'm an assistant. How can I help you? Getting started, but nothing else.
Okay, hang on just
All
a
right.
second.
Consider it, C-O-N. Spell it.
CONSI.
That's what I was missing out.
Did everybody make it back?
We're back.
Okay, so I have we have a counter that I will email to you, but to go through it, why don't I just share my screen
Sounds good.
and then we'll go through it. Okay. All right. Okay. So the top is the same. And so based on the conversation that we just had, and I changed ours to blue because I didn't want to keep using red. So
I appreciate it. Okay, good.
yeah, it makes it easier, right? So we did include a section that we can start here. Certainly this will not be everything under this section, but I started a health and safety provisions. So what I did was,
Oh, okay. So this is really a separate section, but it's just right before the leave.
well, it was based on the I mean, it doesn't have to be before the leave. I just created it based on what we talked about.
Okay.
Because
All right.
we talked about the language would be amiable if we put it in a different section, right?
Okay.
Okay, well, that's what I thought we said. So
You
that's
said
what
we, okay, that's fine. We'll look at it.
yeah, you can counter. So I moved that language here. So exactly what we had before that was had a strike through. I still can't figure out how to say that correctly. And then I added just two other things since I was thinking along health and safety. So the second paragraph is if an employee deems a situation to be a danger to the health and or safety of themselves or the students, the district shall respond in writing listing the actions taken to correct the situation prior to the next workday. So very similar to what we currently have in the contract, but I changed the timeline. So that's Article 5, Health and Safety. That's where that thought process came from.
What does it look like to deem a situation?
So synonyms to, to
I guess here's what I'm getting at.
to identify, to state, to
No.
determine.
Okay.
What do you want here?
That's fair. That's fair because that's exactly the question I asked. But here's what I meant.
So if a barking dog comes up to me, I'm going to deem that situation to be probably dangerous, right?
Okay, and that's a great example. So what I'm getting at here is and I'm going to go back to the consistency purpose because I could get myself into some dangerous territory talking through this, but I'm going to go back to the consistency purpose where we have one situation where there's an I am in close proximity. My workplace space is in very close proximity to someone or to anyone within, let's say I have to share a desk with somebody. Let's deem that unsafe. But then the other situation where then we have another employee who looks at another situation and says, well, I don't deem it to be unsafe because I'm wearing my PPE all the time and I'm taking on that responsibility. So it's not unsafe for me. So in what case or scenario, if we're leaving it entirely up to me as an individual rather than having a flow chart or any kind of guidelines to run that by, I just think we're putting employees in a position to make a very difficult call for themselves and thereby the supervisors in a difficult position to have to respond to that. So I'm looking for what are we going by that's going to deem unsafe?
Okay, so I think that we have a document that should be guiding all of the work that we're doing, and that's the CDC guidelines. Those CDC guidelines, what we're hearing from the knowledgeable others in the healthcare profession. Certainly, Rachel, you and I are not the people to go to for this guidance because
thank you for that. Yes,
right,
I agree.
right, because that's not what we do. But if they wanted to know about, ELA for you and basic math for me, I could cover that spread, right?
Right.
But we do have guiding documents, and we do have access to resources that will make these determinations very clear. And so what we've been hearing all along is that we are following the CDC guidelines. So and what we know is that our teachers and our paraprofessionals, they are the front line for us.
Right.
We haven't been able to obtain that designation for some reason or another, but they are the frontline workers for us in our schools doing this work every day. So I believe that these statements that we're putting in are empowering our frontline workers to take the lead and say, this is not the right place for me or my students. We've got to do something about this.
So am I hearing you say then, if I were to play around with some language that included guidance such as that if there is a situation that is in direct conflict to the flow chart or CDC guidelines, those will be immediately resolved?
I think we could take a look at that. I mean, that's a step in the right direction, certainly.
Okay.
Absolutely.
There's
And everything
no promises there. I'm just trying to get at what it is where the intent or and I know what the intent is, but I'm trying to get to something that's a little more consistent as far as application wise. I mean, it sounds good, but I've been on the other end of implementation and when you get down to implementation, it goes along the same lines as we were talking about the other day of what's a full plate, because one person's full plate is somebody else's half full plate. And I don't want to put our teachers or our administrators in a position where I'm making a judgment about a feeling.
And I get that. And I think it does go back to what we were saying before, where there should be some benchmarks and standards. And if we can agree on those benchmarks, fundamental understandings of how we're going to do business, then we've got something to work with here.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So let me play with that.
Okay. So then the last one before we go back through the other part of the document is, so under health and safety provisions, we would like to ask for a weekly list of positive COVID cases, just the location and the number at each location. We certainly would not violate any HIPAA or any confidentiality information. We just want to know where and how many. And so the thought process was the information would be provided on a Monday for the previous week, just so we could get an idea of what's going on here.
All right. Let me investigate that.
Okay. All right. And then, so over here in blue again, we just put back in there that we would reconvene to negotiate any changes. So we wanted to stick with that one. Down here, I just put COVID-19 in front of FMLA. I think we kind of talked about this being, this FMLA would be specific to COVID.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that, but what I would say is just for clarification part, there is no COVID-19 FMLA. So could we say at the end of the sentence, as it relates to COVID-19? I mean, it's just a little bit of, and it, the lawyer says that's fine. I'll be fine with it too. I just want to make sure.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't do that.
Okay.
So yeah, okay. Okay, down here, we added a sentence just for clarification. If FFCRA leave is rescinded or altered at the state or federal level, the parties will meet immediately to resolve the impact of such change. So that was kind of based on our discussion. And then we still wanted to have this information here just as a resource, just as a one-stop shop, I guess. If someone is reading this and then they say, well, what does it even say? It's just right here. I think last week we talked about maybe we could build attachments to the MOA. You know, I don't know. It's just for informational purposes, just so they have it.
Excuse me.
Did you have a question?
Nope, no question.
Okay. We want to stick with the leave provisions right here. We really do feel that that if the district is telling someone they need to go home and all of their other leave as we've already mentioned through the document, is exhausted, that it needs to be paid administrative leave. I heard everything that you said about the district and finances, but cost, the cost should not override the impact that this whole situation is having on the lives of the employees and the students, for that matter, right? So the students go home, we don't have to pay for that necessarily, but if the adults go home, they shouldn't have to use their own sick leave. They should have paid administrative leave. And I just feel like if we can't afford these very basic supports to our employees, if we can't ensure that the environment is going to be safe and conducive to work following the CDC guidelines and the protective measures that were put in place, and if for some reason they have to go home, we can't pay for them, then I don't know if we're even ready to reopen yet. So if we can't do provide these basic assurances for our folks, are we even ready to reopen and bring them back in? I don't know that we are. So that was the thinking there. We want to keep all of this information intact so that folks will understand about their confidentiality. Again, because if they read the suggested language that was supplied with the counter that you sent over, it's not enough there to make it make sense. It's very invisible. So that's why we wanted to keep that there. And then returning it to work, again, we are of the position that I just mentioned before. If we can't help our folks out, are we even ready to open the doors? So that's where we're at.
Okay. So we have about 7 minutes left, and I would need to, obviously would need a caucus.
Sure.
And a counter back. So what I would like to ask is this, can we be given some time with this? I don't really want to promise you a counter at 7 a.m. in the morning, only because I've got to get all my people together, and I don't want to make a promise that I can't keep. So
I agree with you. I agree.
Why don't we do this? Let's talk about some things that we want to start with tomorrow. And at some point tomorrow, I will make a commitment that we'll get together a counter, or at least let you know where we are with a counter.
That's fine. And I get that completely. I would not expect you to be able to counter at all. 7 minutes. No way.
Okay.
You're welcome. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
I'll email this to you in a minute.
Very good.
Or when we're done, but okay. So I would like to throw something out for tomorrow's purposes. And just to confirm, we're going 7 to 9:30. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I
know there's a board meeting at 10. So,
right.
Okay.
So were we going to 9 or 9:30?
Give me a second.
Hold on. We're looking. I thought it was 9:30.
It's 9:30.
Okay.
Okay.
9:30.
Okay. So, all right. So I haven't even mentioned this to my team, but it just kind of popped in, you know how things do. Last Thursday, Mr. West made a statement about office specialist job descriptions.
Yes.
And I'd like to revisit that, have a bit of a conversation around that if we could.
Okay. Did you get those? I sent those to you this morning.
They're probably sitting in there.
Okay.
Haven't seen
I
them.
did, just so you know, I did send them to you, so we would be prepared to have that conversation if
Okay.
that's good.
Was there, well, now you pick one.
Oh, for tomorrow?
Uh-huh.
Do you want to go back to, I think we left off on secondary, or do we, actually what I'd like to do is revisit the elementary Volusia Live and shore that up, because I think we're pretty close on that, and then talk about go into secondary after that, because I know Dr. Raimundo did some research and has some information about pre-K specifically. I know there were some questions hanging out about that, and we have those answers, so we could be prepared to talk about that tomorrow.
So now, but let's think about this for a second. So are we going to talk about specific tasks at elementary, or are we just talking about the mechanism?
Mechanism.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And that may be actually throwing out there more than we're going to be able to accomplish in 2.5 hours, but at least we have kind of a roadmap.
Right. And if we do happen to have a few minutes,
We do have some retirement incentive information as well. So I don't know if you'd rather.
yes, can we put that on there too?
Sure. And why don't you put that above the Volusia Life? That way we can get some of these out of the way. Thank you, Dr.
Okay. Yep, that would be great. And just before we hang up or disconnect, whatever this is, I had a moment to go back through the reopening presentation. I was looking at some of the slides when we were caucusing because I was trying to wrap my head around the work that's going on currently at the school sites. So there was a slide in the presentation that talked about plans that were being created and included, and I don't expect you to have it memorized, but it included arrival procedures, classroom considerations, transitions, lunch, dismissal. Are those the tasks that they're currently working on?
Yes.
Okay, because some of those definitely will have impacts that we're going to have to discuss.
Well,
Lunch, so if it's more than walking to, getting to and from, if it involves, managing students during lunch, that's something we'll have to talk about. If it doesn't, then we don't have to. But
no, what they're talking about specifically, and I can speak like at the elementary level, give you, and at the secondary level, concrete examples, and Dr. Raimundo's here, she can jump in and if I'm saying something incorrect, is that they're talking about extending the lunch period, the amount of time available for lunch. So teachers would still have that 30-minute lunch time, but extending the period would allow fewer classes. And remember, we're going to have less students on campus as it is. And then that would allow us to space them out appropriately. So, and that is the kind of thing that they're working on.
That's what they're working
is
on.
revisiting their lunch schedules, looking at how the students enter the cafeteria, how they're sitting within the cafeteria, and then what the dismissal procedures would be.
Correct.
Thank you for that. You reminded me of something that I wanted to bring up. So the data about where the kids are enrolling.
Yes.
So because at some point, so we know that there's a certain number of kids that have selected Volusia Online. And this was brought to my attention over the weekend, and I found it to be very strange. It seems that there is a movement or some kind of organized effort to reach out to parents, either on the phone, and encourage them to re-enroll in either brick and mortar or Volusia Live, to abandon VOL and come back to the school sites. Is that something that you're aware of? Like administrators asking their folks to call parents and say, hey, it's safe to come on back?
No, I'm not aware of that at all.
Okay. And the reason, because I found that to be highly problematic for a variety of different reasons. Number one, I would be really offended if somebody called me and said, hey, Albert, you've made a bad choice for your kid, bring them back. I'd say, but that's just me. But
let me research that and find out where that's coming from.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And then the reason I put that out there is because when kids do migrate back, because at some point they are going to come back, right? So as they start to come back, are there contingency plans that are being developed to then kind of shift for those re-arrivals, whether they're at the 9-week period or the semester period, and how we do that?
So I hope that that's part of this work that we're doing here. And one of the reasons that as we talk through this, is there a plan? Yes, there's always a plan, because as your student population changes, you're going to have to make adjustments to who does what, which is why when we have these conversations, I don't want to lock it into it has to be this way, because we are going to eventually have to look at, we've got more students coming back to brick and mortar. We need to add those teachers back. So yes, to answer that question, are we thinking about that? Yes. Are we making plans? Yes. But a lot of that work is contingent upon this work.
Well, of course, but all right. Okay. Well, I think Do you have anything else you want to just toss out there? Little thinking?
No, not right now.
Okay.
I feel like my brain's full. I'm sure you can teach me. Yeah.
I know.
I do want to add to our next meeting, if you could, we started to go over those, I think you call them 2 clearances, a test-based and a non-test. So if you could add those to the list to talk about next time, I'd appreciate that.
Sure thing.
Thanks. I'm sorry I forgot that, Tracy. I know we'd talked about it.
That's okay.
Sure.
All right. Well, it's 2:31, so I guess the early release will come over. I'll sign it, scan it, send it back.
Yes.
Yep.
Amber will be sending it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So are we can we just jump in the breakout room? Or should we go to the other room?
Either one.
I think our people are they jumping off? Oh, they're so fast.
Looks like most of our people are here still.
Okay. We'll just do the breakout room for a couple minutes. There we go. Where's Joy? See, she's so fast. Joy, we're going to the breakout room.
Matt, are you able to get to the breakout room?